Okay, in this video I'm going to be showing you another feature related to formulas and functions in Excel, which is how to validate your data when you're entering it into your models or even into your data sets when you're analyzing customer data, for example. And then I'm also going to be showing you how to uniqueify your list, is what I call it. Basically, how to take a set of data and make sure that every entry in it is actually unique. That, for example, if you have 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, you just end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 afterward. And so once again, we're working with our basic LBO model. And for this one, I'm actually going to show you the uniqueifying list part first here at the bottom. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom here, and beneath the sensitivity table, I'm just going to enter some sample data right here to show you this one. So let's say I have a list of numbers, and it's 5, 10, 10, 15, 20, 20, 25. Okay. So we see that this list has basically two repeats, the 10 and then the 20 down here. So we could just look at this and go in and try to manually remove the duplicates because we can just look at it quickly and tell that 10 is repeated and that 20 is repeated right here. But that's really only feasible if you have a very small list like we do here. If we were to have a list of thousands, hundreds of thousands of items, then that would just not be feasible anymore. So the way we want to be doing this is to select this list with Control Shift and the down arrow key to get everything. And then we press Alt D. Alt D gets us to the data menu in Excel 2003, and it still works in 2007, except it doesn't display all the keys. So Alt D, F for filter, and then A for advanced filter. So let's look at what we have here first. I'm going to go back to the bottom. So we have a couple different options. We can filter the list in place, we can copy it to another location, then we can establish the criteria that we want to have. And as with what we went over when we were going over the SUMIF and the COUNTIF and some of those other conditional functions, this criteria we're pretty flexible in terms of options on the criteria here. But the most common way you use this advanced filter function is to filter the data to get only unique records in here. So let's just look at how we might do this. So for the list range, use the arrow key and just select this range right here with Shift Control and the down arrow key. Then for criteria range, we're actually just going to leave this one blank because we just want to select unique records here. So I'll hit Alt R to get to unique records. And then I want to copy this to another location. Now, you could try to filter this list in place. And let me just show you what happens quickly if you do that. And then I'll explain why we usually don't do that. So let's say I press enter here right now. Okay. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. However, if you look closely at the screen, you see what's actually happened here is that this row skips from 90 to 92 and then from 93 to 94. So what's actually going on here is that we haven't really deleted these duplicate items. We've just hidden the rows. And actually, if we highlight the whole area like this, we press Alt-D-G-G to group, Alt-D-G-H to hide, and then Alt-D-G-S to show, we see exactly what's happened here, that these rows have just been hidden by Excel. So in most cases in Excel when we're doing this, it's better to be copying the data to a new location so that the original set, the one that had the duplicates, is all saved in one location, and then the set that's uniqueified is what I call it, that is unique and has no duplicate records, is in a separate location. So let's look at how we actually copy it to a new location. But by the way, the other problem with doing what I just did is that it can sometimes mess up the rest of your worksheet if you're doing it like that. So it's just safer to kind of copy it to a new location when you're removing duplicates. So once again, I'm going to press Shift Control down arrow key to highlight everything, and then Alt DFA for advanced filter. We'll just ignore this warning message about labels. And so what we're going to do here is go to copy to another location. So Alt O to get to that. And then we see that C89 to C95 have been selected here, so that's fine. What we want to do here is pretty simple. We're just going to paste this data right below here. So we see that right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows here. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows down here. And we want to make sure that unique records only is checked because that's exactly what we're doing here, removing duplicates. We only want unique records. And now we'll hit enter. And our duplicates have been removed. And you see the advantage of doing it this way. Unlike the method where we just copy it in, where we just filter it in place, we see that here we actually don't have any hidden rows because it goes from 97 through 101. We're left with 5 entries. So that's how you make list data unique when you're in Excel. Again, more useful when you're trying to debug your models, you're trying to find errors with, it's very useful with data sets because oftentimes the company, your clients will be giving you duplicate data that you have to get rid of. But that's the basics of how you do that. So I'm just going to go in and delete all that right now. Now I'm going to go up to the top and show you another feature that's very useful. And it's related to this with sort of making sure that you have the right set of data, validating it, and making sure that all your inputs are correct. And you know from the previous video that we had added in scenarios. And in this version, we're using offset to model out some of these different scenarios. Scenarios 1, 2, and 3 here at the top. Well, the problem is with this, what happens if we enter 4 for this scenario right here? So we'll enter 4. And everything goes to 0. We have a huge problem with our IRR, our circularity, and everything is off because scenario 4 corresponds to this blank column over here and there's no data. So we want to add some error checking to make sure that cases like that cannot actually happen. Let me just change this back to 1 for now. See the IRR and everything returns to the correct values. So I'm going to show you how to validate this and make sure that we're entering the right numbers here. So to validate data, we press Alt-D. Alt-D takes us to the data commands in Excel, and then L for validation. Okay, so let me pull this to the center of the screen. So we can change a couple different options here. For allow, we have a couple different ones we can pick from. One way we could do this is we could select, and by the way, I pressed Alt-A to get to allow. We could select whole numbers. We have these options for dates, times, for different types of input validation. So one way we could do this is for whole number, we could just say data is between, and you see we have all these other options, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. So we could just say between 1 and 3 here. And that would be one way that we could do this. Press enter. Okay, and so now we don't see any changes here right away, but let's try entering 4 now. And now we get an error message. So we can hit retry. We try 1, that's fine. 2 is fine. 3 is fine. But if we enter 2.5, we get an error message. If we enter 0, we get an error message. So that's one method you can use for data validation. And that works, but I would suggest actually the better way to be doing it would be slightly different. And to do it the better way, you would go to Alt-DL for validation again. And under allow, the problem here is that we've hard-coded the numbers in. The other problem is that even if we were to change this, so let's say for minimum, for example, we went up here under the scenarios and we entered 1, the cell J4, and then we entered L4 for the maximum. That would be better, but we still run into the problem of always having to go back and change it within this data validation dialog in case it changes. So I would suggest that the better way to do it would be to press Alt-DL, and under allow, we go to list. And we see we have a couple different options. We can ignore blank. We actually probably want to uncheck that here because we want to make sure this always has a value in it. And then in cell dropdown. So this just gives us a little dropdown box where you can select the different values. I think this is actually very useful to have. So we're going to keep that checked because it can show you exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's another one of those few cases in Excel where it's almost okay to use the mouse just to see what's in the dropdown box. And then for source, I'll press Alt-S to get to that. For source, I'll press the arrow key to move out into the spreadsheet, and then I'll press Control and the up arrow key to move to the top. And we're going to select this region right here with Shift Control right arrow key from J4 to L4. Now we'll press Enter. And now we see what happens. Now whenever we move to the cell, we get this drop-down box to the side right here. And when we go ahead and click on it, we see we have the options 1, Scenario 1, Scenario 2, and Scenario 3. And again, this is very useful. If we try to enter 4, for example, we get an error message again. So this is very useful for your models and to make sure that whoever's using it after you is actually entering the right inputs. And it's really, really helpful for error checking. Doesn't work for everything. It's more helpful when you have a limited set of inputs like we do here. It's very difficult to error check, for example, if you're working with something like purchase price or revenue where the values can just be all over the place. But if it's something with fairly fixed values, this validation that we've just done is very helpful. So the exercise here is pretty simple, and I'm just going to go ahead in and change this back to what it was set to originally, which is allow any value. And I'll just go to any value and press enter there. So for the exercise, I just want you to replicate what I just did here. And I'll go through it one more time so you can see. And then I'll, once again, pause the video and you can try it yourself. And then we'll go through it together and I'll give you all the shortcuts. So just go to data validation and then allow, say list. Make sure ignore blank is unchecked and in cell dropdown is checked. Go to source. Go up to the top here. Select those. And there we have it. And if you click the mouse right there, you can see the different options. Okay, so pause the video right now, try to do that yourself, and then if you get stuck or you forget the shortcuts, just come back, unpause it, and I'll walk you through it by giving you the full shortcuts this time. Okay, good. So I just undid some of my changes there with Control Z. And now I'm going to go in and replicate everything with the shortcuts this time. So for validation, I'll press Alt D L. Then for allow, to get to allow, I press Alt A. I use the arrow key, or I can just press L to move down to list. Press enter. Now for ignore blank, I would press Alt B to check and uncheck that. For in-cell dropdown, I press Alt I to check and uncheck that. We'll keep the in-cell dropdown checked and keep ignore blank unchecked for now. And then for source, I press Alt S to get there. I press the arrow key to move from the source dialog onto the spreadsheet itself. I press Control up to get to the top here under the different scenarios. Press Shift Control right arrow key to select that whole region. Then I press enter and we're left with our dialog box now. So we have scenario 3, we can change it back to scenario 1 and see that it works fine. So again, very, very helpful to be using this in your own models. I recommend you get used to it because you're going to see it in other people's models quite a bit, and it's just good to get into the habit of using this in your own to make sure all the data is correct and to make sure whoever uses the model after you or anyone else on your team can easily tell what's going on and what types of inputs are acceptable. So that's pretty much it on this topic. In the next lesson, I'm going to go through how to set up data tables. So sensitivity tables like we have here at the bottom. Some of this will be review and some of it we've touched on before, but I just want to go over it because it is important and it's good to know the shortcuts for how to do that. So that'll be partially review as well. And then after that, I'm going to be getting into some more advanced topics, the last few parts of this course, like lookup functions, pivot tables, macros, and custom keyboard shortcuts.